Well, we got a mess on our hands. As usual, anytime you pull a motor out, it just makes a big mess. I don't care how hard you try. And I've gotten pretty proficient at it over the years. I take a transfer pump and I get as much coolant out of it as possible so it doesn't spill all over the car when you pull the motor out. But came out pretty easily. All the years I've done this, I've always used a rigging point in my garage. This particular house that we're in now, I don't have a good rigging point, so I had to buy a cherry picker, which I've never had before, and it just doesn't, all the way out, it doesn't have enough reach, so I had to kind of improvise to get it out. But anyways, it wasn't a big deal. So we went ahead and we stripped it down to a long block. Um, long block is pretty much what you see, no pan, no accessories, nothing. It's just the head, the rotating assembly, it's all the internals. Usually includes an oil pump. Sometimes it doesn't. I went ahead, I pulled the oil pump off. I'm not going to be reusing it though. Jeff supplies one. Preliminary inspection looks pretty decent. They didn't do something stupid like keeping the same timing chain. There's still plenty of tension on here. They did reuse the balancer, which I hadn't noticed before. The rubber in the balancer was completely cracked, and I'll show you that in a minute. That's a big no-no. And I have a dual groove setup. It's a single groove balancer with a second pulley bolted onto it for the power steering. I've gone to a double groove balancer. I got it in already. I will be replacing it with a double groove. The double grooves are better because they have a lot more rubber holding the weight onto the hub. Looks to me like they probably replaced the bolt, which probably came with the timing set for the cam. The cam is in pretty decent shape. We'll go ahead and we'll flip the motor over here so you can see it. But we've all seen the top end of this thing. So let's get it flipped over and we'll go over the rotating assembly. Okay, so here's the rotating assembly, bottom side. They did reuse the pistons. I was relatively certain of that before because of the amount of carbon that was on top of them. They had cleaned off the loose stuff, but they were black, so they did reuse the pistons. I'm not too sure why. That's not something I ever do. They're cheap enough. I guess they're not cheap, but they're worth replacing. The cam doesn't have any flat lobes or anything like that. It looks pretty normal. I haven't pulled the timing set off, so I don't know what cam it is yet. I don't think I'm going to, though. And then that all looks pretty normal. That's what you want to see in a cam lobe. It's nice and shiny. It doesn't show any excessive wear. Nothing like that. They did balance this rotating assembly. I can tell by looking at it. They've definitely taken material out of the rods. That's not. I mean, it is factory. They do balance them that way, but this has been ground more. I can just tell by looking at it and how fresh it is. This rod hasn't had very much taken off of it. You can see. This rod's had a lot taken off. Most of them had quite a bit taken off. This one a little bit less. So, that's how you balance these things. So you take the weight, you weigh all of the components, the new rings and everything, and then you want to get the rods about the same weight as well. So they do that as part of the balancing. I don't know because I'm not a machinist, but I know enough about it. So that's how you get the rods all about the same weight. And then you add up all the weight of the rods, the rings, the pistons, all that. And they put bobs on here that are the representative of the weight. And then you run it up on a balancing machine and it tells you how much to take off of it. And usually what you do is you take material off the front and the rear. So that's what this is right here. It's been cut and I can see it looks to me like it's had a little bit taken off of it. Usually you have to end up taking material off. I think sometimes you have to add it. It is a 10-10. I'm pretty certain. So it's 10 under mains, 10 under rods, which means it'll have bearings to compensate. It'll have 10-10 bearings in it for both the mains and the crank, or the rods, mains and rods. Stock bolts, that's normal. No reason. I've reused main bolts before, especially in a stock setup. It just doesn't really matter. The rod bolts, I'm sure, were probably replaced. I would hope that they were replaced. You just don't reuse rod bolts. They stretch. So, this bottom end was probably fine. I'm a little scared of the pistons. that's mainly the reason why I'm just going with a new or another rebuilt, complete rebuild. I could have done a short block. I could have kept my short block, and I could have had Jeff give me a head. But I wasn't confident in anything they'd done in here. So nothing scary down here. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it anyways. They did reuse the flex plate. That's a no-no. Don't reuse the flex plate. They do crack. And the reason I know it's reused is because it's got the Fomoco stamp on it. So let's go take a look at that real quick. Here's the flex plate, Fomoco right there. It doesn't have any cracks in it yet, but they do crack. Eventually, it will. They fatigue. So that's good. That's the engine plate. Don't forget to put that on. That's very important for the torque converter spacing. You must have that. So nothing trick there. So anyways, I picked up another one of these. They're only about $20. We got everything all torn apart here. Yeah, the paint job on this car sucks and it needs to be painted, so I'm using it to store stuff. Timing cover, water pump. The water pump was new. I'm just going to clean it up. It was new when they rebuilt it. Let's see. We did get the new sniper in right here. So that's the 2-barrel 2300 unit. That's a flex plate down there. Here are the new balancer and the old balancer. This is the old one. This is the new one right here. I did check them for the same offset distance and all that. Here I'll show you. Well, let me pull this off of here real quick. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you, and this is where my trust goes away from whoever did this motor. This is not, because they painted it and there's like cracked paint. That's not it at all. This rubber is actually cracked. It's cracked in many places. That will make these, and look at how hard it is. It's hard as a rock. Just freaking hard. And that's a big no-no. You never reuse a balancer. I'm going to venture to guess the reason that they reuse the balancer is because this thing's about $100. This one, the double groove, this is like a $180 balancer. I had a coupon for, I got this particular one at O'Reilly's just because I had a coupon. You can get them just about anywhere, Rock Auto, Summit. I think they all sell them. But you only have this much rubber on these, and they will slip. This has got rubber over both grooves over the entire distance of that hub that they hold on a whole lot better. So yeah, this is what I've talked about, and I think in another video about, you're in there, you're doing the motor, but then you cheap out and you don't want to replace the balancer because it's, in this case, it's something that's a little bit more expensive. I'm surprised these balancers cost that much, but they do. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. That's something if that happens, if this thing slips, you're going to set your timing off because now your timing mark isn't going to line up where it's supposed to. And by the way, this is just like a small block Chevy. Your timing mark does not line up with your keyway. Chevys is the same way. I want to say, geez, boy, now I'm starting to forget. I want to say a Chevy, the timing mark is not in line with the keyway. I want to say the keyway is straight up and down and the timing mark's over here. So, that's just something to keep your eye on. I did go ahead and I took my yellow paint pen and I already filled in the line on here. When you're going to set your timing, that just makes it so much easier. Just put a little yellow paint, nail polish, go steal it from your wife, and put a little bit of paint in there. I prefer to use these things. These work real well. You can get them anywhere, art store or Staples or online. I think I got that one on Amazon. I did notice they put a little silicone in here. It depends on how tight the press fit is on these. This was not very hard for me to get off. So sometimes it's not a bad idea to put silicone in these when you put them on. I've never done it before in a Chevy, but Chevys, they're on there so freaking tight. I mean, it takes a huge puller to get them off. This thing, I put the puller on it and I pulled it off by hand with the puller. So I may put a little silicone in there because what can happen is the oil can seep between the crank and the hub here. We're going to go ahead. We'll put a new front main and the timing cover as well since we're in there. Something else they didn't do. let me show you here, is the bolt holes for the crank. They do go all the way through. If you don't put sealant on the threads, it will leak oil through here, and it was leaking a little bit of oil. I could tell by looking at the back of the flex plate. So make sure you put a little silicone in there. You probably could use pipe sealant, although for oil I prefer to use just a little ultra gray or black or right stuff black. All those will work just fine here. Just put a little bit on the threads when you go to torque it down. So now we're just kind of stalled here for the moment. I'm waiting, for Jeff he's got to do the head. He's got to do the 2V conversion on the head, and he's got to build me a short block, and he's busy. He's backed up with a couple motors. It's probably going to be a couple of weeks before we throw this thing in the back of the truck and we just take it up to him. It'll go to him just like this. I'm going to just lay it down in the back of the truck. I'll put some cribbing underneath it and strap it down because it's a over 3 hour ride. So it's just going to go to him like that. And then we'll come back and we're going to put it in. For the time being, the exhaust manifold will stay. I bent the shit out of the exhaust pipe pulling the motor out by myself because the corner of the manifold got caught on the engine mount when I was pulling it out. And the manifold made it up to here before I realized it. And I bent the pipe. So I kind of bent it back, but, anyways, it's gonna go together with the manifold. I ordered a header for it, and we'll figure that out later. We're gonna get it running first, and then I'll put the header on it. Anything of surprise with the transmission. It's got a date code on the torque converter. I do know they rebuilt the trans when they did the motor. It's very obvious the trans is very clean. Obviously, it was rebuilt. The throttle linkage is going to come out of there. We did get a V8 linkage pedal setup. That's what this is right here. Got the whole thing on eBay. Thanks, John, for the tip. There's the admins that are on the Vintage 6 forum on Facebook. These guys are all pretty sharp, except for Aaron. But that's fine. Anyways, so that's going to go in place. It takes a little bit of drilling to mount that because it's just different. It mounts very differently. There aren't holes, for both like a V8 and a inline 6. I'm going to have to drill the holes for it and figure that out. The linkage itself is going to be a throttle cable. There's the low car cable right there. That'll take care of the linkage between the new pedal and the sniper. And I'm going to have to come up with brackets to mount the cable. So we'll figure that out as we go. So I'm going to do some of that work while we're waiting to while we're waiting to take the motor up to Jeff. We're going to get the throttle linkage going and clean up a few things and pretty much ready to just drop it back in here. When we do drop it back in, I will reassemble more. I took a lot of stuff off of it before I pulled it out, but when the timing cover goes on, 2 of the bolts for the power steering go through the power steering bracket. So the power steering bracket will be on there when I go to drop it. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to put it back in with all that stuff, but it's much easier to put the water pump and cover and all that stuff on out of the car. Well, the cover has to go on because the pan's got to go on, and that's part of the pan. So, but I'm going to assemble as much as I can and then drop it in. And just as a little added info, I did get the V8 throttle in here, and it's a little correction to what I said. The 3 bolt holes for the new V8 bracket, the firewall was punched for them. So I'm assuming that they just punched the sheet metal for a 6 and an 8 from the factory. I was just surprised to find that because John had said when he did his that he had to drill the holes. So I don't know if they started doing it after a certain year or month. I forget. I think John's car is 66, but I could be wrong. But it was there, so not too hard. I had to get the old one out, and we'll fill the holes. And the V8 bracket's in there. I do need to do the kickdown linkage. I ordered a V8 cable and linkage for the kickdown because it is a little bit different. but I should just be able to bolt up the, I should be able to change the arm and the cable and all that, and it should bolt right up to that. So that's pretty much where we're at for now. This will clear the inline 6. I did ask John. He said that it was no modifications needed. So the way I'm seeing this line up, I'm almost certain that I'm going to be able to pull a bracket right off of the valve cover for the throttle cable, which will work out just fine. So if you ever need to take the valve cover off, inevitably, right? All I'll have to do is just disconnect the cable from here and the sniper, which will obviously be right here, and the cable and the brackets and everything will just come with the valve cover. So we'll just drill a couple holes in the valve cover and seal it up where the angle brackets will be to hold the cable. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, here is the cable. And you see it would the bracket will end up going in between those two nuts where that gap is right there. And the same thing right here. You have to have a little bracket to hold that. And then this low car setup, like I said, I used these before. This is 36 inches, but you just cut it to length. So, once we figure out what we want it to be, you trim the sheath and the cable, and you can just, there's a set screw there for the cable to hold the cable. It's not crimped or anything like that. So these are really nice. Low car is expensive, American made, high quality stuff, which is getting hard to find. All right, well, we'll probably call this part 2, and next you see will probably be a shot of us driving up the 5 to go see Jeff.